Now, join us on the program right now, Dr. A.W.R. Hawkins from the Daily Caller. Dr. Hawkins, how you doing tonight, sir?
Doing great, Cam. Good to be with you.
Well, it's great having you back on again. I got to tell you, you have been on fire lately in the Daily Caller. Last time we had you on, you were taking on the Harvard history professor. What was her name? Lepore, right?
Right. Jill Lepore.
Jill
You're exactly
Lepore.
right.
And so this is sort of almost a sequel to that column. How are gun rights God-given and inalienable?
You're exactly right, and it is a sequel. I had a question or two come to me after that article, and honest questioners, not people who were trying to be confrontational, honest questioners asked, I don't see in the Bible an outright or explicit mention of gun rights. How can you keep tying this to God? And it provided a perfect opportunity to go into natural law and as you know, Cam, also divine law, both together explain how we have a right that comes from God, not government. And so I had the opportunity to expound on that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you say, divine law consists of the Ten Commandments and the outworking of those commandments in the New Testament, natural law consisting of the order intrinsic to nature and the universe around it. Let's talk about natural law for a little bit, because in the time that our founders were writing, when they talked about God-given rights or natural rights, a lot of times as deists, or when they were deists who were writing, they were often referring to basically the same concept, right?
Right. They were referring. Thomas Jefferson hung his hat on natural law. Thomas Jefferson hung his hat on John Locke and William Blackstone. And both of those men expounded natural law to a degree we can't hardly comprehend today. And that's not due to our lack of intelligence. It's due to the fact that the left has taken over academia. But were we teaching that today, if they were teaching that then, we would know with Thomas Jefferson that God operates not only through divine law, which we find in the Bible, but he also operates through natural law, which is the order he's instituted in nature. And even without a Bible, without ever seeing a Bible, just seeing nature itself and experiencing the order in it, I can understand right and wrong. I can understand so many things. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I can understand is that my life is the greatest possession I have, and it is not only my right to defend it, but my duty to defend it. Thomas Jefferson knew that, and that's a foundational thought to the Declaration of Independence as well as to the Kentucky-Virginia resolutions.
Well, absolutely. And, the quotes that you have from John Locke, you've got three of them. And do you mind if I put them all together?
I don't mind.
Because I think it's just such a great summation of what natural law is about. I know that sometimes, we think about the old philosophers and we get a little, freaked out about, are we going to be able to understand what they mean? John Locke, absolutely. The state of nature, he wrote, has a law of nature to govern it, which obliges everyone, and reason, which is that law, teaches all mankind who will but consult it, that being all equal and independent, no one ought to harm another in his life, health, liberty, or possessions. For men being all the workmanship of one omnipotent and infinitely wise maker, all the servants of one sovereign master, sent into this world by his order. In other words, the natural law is leave people alone. Don't hurt other people. We're all in this together. We all have our intrinsic natural rights, and you don't you violate natural law by trying to get ahead at the expense of another. In essence, right?
That's exactly right. My natural rights stop where they infringe upon your natural rights. That is the boundary that we see in nature.
Okay. And he said, in transgressing the law of nature, the offender declares himself to live by another rule than that of reason and common equity, which is that measure God has set to the actions of men for their mutual security, and so he becomes dangerous to mankind. And then you quote John Locke as saying, this makes it lawful for a man to kill a thief who has not in the least hurt him, nor declared any design upon his life, any farther than by the use of force, so to get him in his power as to take away his money, or what he pleases from him. Because using force where he has no right to get me into his power, let his pretense be what it will, I have no reason to suppose that he who would take away my liberty would not, when he had me in his power, take away everything else. John Locke, more than 200 years ago, Dr. Hawkins, rebutted the gun control argument and the argument that we saw from people like the deputy mayor for public safety in Washington, D.C., that when you are the victim of a violent crime, when you are the victim of an armed robbery, the best thing to do is to acquiesce and to put your faith in the individual who is violating the law.
That's exactly right, because what you do at that point is you show you either have no ability, A, or B, you don't have the will to respond, and that person knows they can run roughshod over you, and that person has already demonstrated the fact that they have the desire to run roughshod over you. So you're letting them know you can do whatever you want to do to me. I will not respond. I will only cow down. And Locke recognized if you do that, it will only escalate the violence they had planned in the first place.
See, this is I love this example that you gave, Dr. Hawkins, because we always hear from the opponents of the right to keep and bear arms how outdated it is. We didn't have semi-automatic firearms back in the time of the draft in the Second Amendment. Founding fathers wouldn't recognize guns today. Well, they certainly would recognize the concept of self-defense. They would certainly recognize the concept of being able to defend yourself with the most effective tool. And in the time of John Locke, as in the time of today, that most effective tool was a firearm.
You're exactly right, and I'm going to go a step further, not to counter you, Cam,
please,
but just to go further. I know you agree. It's just like Associate Justice Sam Alito in the Supreme Court has said. Not only do we have the right to have a firearm for self-defense, but a handgun is the most preferable firearm for self-defense. Anyone who wishes to can look up the decision in McDonald v. Chicago and read those words from Sam Alito, not from me. Our justice on the Supreme Court said, not only do we have a right to use a firearm to defend ourselves, but a handgun is the most chosen, or I won't say favored, but is the most sought-after weapon for that. So I believe all these arguments, as you're saying, Cam, against the use of guns, semi-automatic or otherwise, for handguns is ridiculous.
Talking with Dr. A.W.R. Hawkins, who has this excellent piece at the Daily Caller. And Dr. Hawkins, thank you again, sir, for coming on the program. It is always a pleasure to get a chance to catch up with you, and hope we can do it again soon.
Thank you, Cam, and God bless you.